They say the courtroom is sacred, that no matter who you are, judge, lawyer, janitor, or cop, you stand when the judge enters. But on that morning, she didn't. Not because she was confused, not because she didn't hear, but because she didn't think she had to. Her name was Avery Monroe, 29 years old, white, a police officer for nearly a decade. She walked into courtroom 6B with a face that said, "You don't scare me." Head high, uniform crisp, not a speck out of place. She wasn't there as an officer of the law that day. She was the defendant, charged with reckless endangerment, accused of almost hitting an elderly man while speeding through a red light. But if you asked her, it was nothing. Just another civilian who wasn't paying attention. Just another morning she had to suffer through the consequences of someone else's mistake. The courtroom was tense before she even walked in. The media had picked it up. Not because of the incident, but because of who would be presiding over the case. Judge Clarence Hale. Black, veteran of the bench. A man known not just for his integrity, but for his intolerance toward arrogance in uniform. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," everyone did, instantly, except one. Avery Monroe stayed in her seat, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the bench as if she were waiting for something amusing to happen, as if she were above it all. And when Judge Hale entered, there was the slightest pause in his step. His eyes scanned the room and then landed on her. She didn't flinch, she didn't blink, she didn't stand. In that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew. This wasn't going to be a routine hearing. This was going to be a war between power and principle, between ego and justice, between a woman who thought her badge made her untouchable and a man who had spent his entire life reminding people that the law doesn't kneel to pride. So let me ask you, if you saw someone treat the courtroom like their personal playground, would you still believe justice is blind? Or would you pray that, for once, justice was watching? Because that morning, she didn't stand. But by the time that gavel fell, the entire courtroom would rise for the truth. Long before she sat in that courtroom refusing to stand, Avery Monroe was a rising star. Not the kind you see in headlines for heroics. The kind you see behind the wheel of a patrol car, fast, fearless, and never second-guessing a thing. She joined the force at 21. Fresh out of the academy, all ambition, no hesitation. The badge meant something to her. Not justice, not community, but control. She loved the sound of her boots on pavement, the power in her voice when she ordered someone to step back, the way doors opened when she showed her ID, the way people obeyed, even when they didn't want to. It wasn't just about the law. It was about being untouchable, and that's exactly how she behaved. Internal complaints came and went. Use of force reports were brushed aside. Supervisors grumbled, but her record was clean enough. On paper, at least. She had friends in the right places. And more importantly, she had no patience for consequences. When people challenged her, she shut them down. When her fellow officers raised concerns, she called them soft. In her world, weakness got you hurt. Apologies got you walked on. So when the incident happened, that flash of red light, the blaring horn, the elderly man stumbling out of the crosswalk, Avery barely blinked. He should have moved faster, she thought. It's not my fault people don't pay attention. She didn't stop, didn't check on him, didn't file a report. She thought it would disappear like everything else, but it didn't. Because the man she almost hit, Walter Jennings, was someone people knew. A retired school teacher, a widower, beloved by his neighborhood, and the security camera from the gas station across the street caught everything. The light, the car, the acceleration, the near miss, and Walter, landing hard on the pavement, arm bent, groaning in pain. That footage hit local news within 24 hours. And for the first time in her career, Avery couldn't hide behind a badge. Still, when she was called into court, she didn't see a problem. To her, it was just optics, a formality, something that would blow over. She thought it would be just another show. She'd sit pretty, say the right words, and walk away untouched. But what Avery didn't know was that the courtroom wasn't the only thing watching. The city had eyes now. The people had questions. And Judge Clarence Hale? He had a memory as sharp as his gavel, and he'd seen too many like her before. By the time the courthouse doors opened that morning, word had already spread, not just about the charges, but about her. The officer who didn't flinch. The woman who nearly ran over a 70-year-old man and shrugged it off like a parking ticket. Reporters clustered outside, camera lenses aimed at every uniformed figure. Inside, the buzz was quieter, but far more intense. Attorneys whispered in corners, clerks exchanged glances. And in the gallery, every seat was filled, not with random bystanders, but with citizens who had watched the footage on the news, who had heard Walter Jennings speak from his hospital bed with that soft voice and swollen wrist. "She didn't even stop," he'd said. "She looked at me like I was nothing." Those words echoed beyond his room. They reached social media. They sparked debates on radio shows. And for once, the usual excuses didn't stick. Maybe she didn't see him. He shouldn't have crossed so slow. She's an officer. Give her some slack. But this time, the public didn't buy it. Because the man was frail, the footage was clear, and the silence afterward, that silence screamed entitlement. So when Avery Monroe entered that courtroom, all eyes tracked her like heat-seeking missiles. Not just because of what she did, but because of how she carried herself. Like a soldier walking into enemy territory, chin high, shoulders back, unapologetic. And when she slouched in her chair, arms crossed, refusing to rise for Judge Hale, you could hear a pin drop. The reporters scribbled furiously. One of the jurors stole a quick glance and swallowed hard. And Walter Jennings? He sat in the third row, quiet, his arms still wrapped in gauze. He didn't glare, didn't shake his head. He just watched, with eyes that had taught generations of kids to sit up and pay attention. Beside him sat a woman in her 50s, lips pursed, hands clutched tightly together. She whispered, "That's her?" Walter nodded slowly. The energy in the room shifted then, from curiosity to judgment. And still, Avery didn't blink. When Judge Hale opened the file and read the charges, his voice was calm, like a man tying the first knot in a long, heavy rope. But everyone knew what that rope was for. Not to hang, but to hold someone accountable. Tight and public and impossible to escape. The law had bent too many times for people like her. But on this day, in this room, it was about to push back. Judge Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When he looked at Avery Monroe, the silence between them said everything. His eyes, dark, sharp, and unwavering, held her like a scalpel over skin. And she, still slouched in her chair, still arms crossed, met that stare with one of her own, smirking, like this was a joke. Like he was just another man in a robe who'd blink first. "Miss Monroe," he said evenly, "you are charged with reckless endangerment, failure to yield, and negligence resulting in bodily harm. Do you understand the charges?" She didn't nod. She shrugged. "Yeah," she said, loud enough for the back row to hear. "I sped up. He got in the way." A quiet gasp rippled through the gallery. Judge Hale blinked once, then turned the page in front of him. According to witness testimony, he continued, you ran a red light, honked, and accelerated, forcing a pedestrian to leap out of the way. Avery tilted her head. He didn't leap, she said, casual. He kind of stumbled. He's old. That's not on me. Another gasp, this one sharper. Her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, Avery, stop, please, this is serious. But she waved him off. The courtroom wasn't just tense now, it was crackling. Every person was on edge, waiting, watching. Judge Hale paused. Then he closed the file gently and folded his hands. Miss Monroe, he said slowly, do you believe that your uniform excuses you from accountability? That's when she laughed. Short, cold, dismissive. I believe people like you make a big deal out of nothing, she said. It's not like I hit the guy. Her words landed like broken glass on hardwood. In the third row, Walter Jennings winced, not in pain, but in disbelief. His good hand tightened on the cane resting by his leg. Judge Hale's jaw tightened, but he didn't retaliate. Instead, he turned to the bailiff and nodded. Bring in Mr. Jennings, he said. The back door creaked open, and suddenly the courtroom turned. All eyes fell on the frail figure stepping forward, arm in a sling, face pale but resolute. Avery's smile faded. For the first time since walking in, she blinked. Walter didn't look at her as he approached. He looked at Judge Hale, and Judge Hale looked at her. This, he said quietly, is the man you nearly struck. The man whose life was disrupted by your recklessness. Look at him. Avery glanced over, quick, dismissive. I told you, she said. He's fine. But no one believed her anymore, because arrogance had finally met its mirror, and that mirror had a name. The weight in the room shifted the second Walter Jennings reached the witness stand. He didn't carry anger. He carried something heavier, dignity. With his good hand, he adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and spoke with a voice that wasn't loud, but made everyone lean in. I don't want revenge, he said plainly. I just want her to understand. No drama, no emotion, just truth. Avery rolled her eyes. Subtle, but visible. It didn't go unnoticed. Judge Hale nodded to the clerk, who tapped a button on the desk. The screen behind the bench flickered. A black and white video began to play. Grainy, but clear. Security footage from the gas station across the street. Avery's patrol car. The red light. The old man stepping into the crosswalk. And then, the car lunged forward. The horn blared. Walter jumped sideways, barely. His cane flew. He hit the pavement hard. A collective inhale filled the courtroom. Even Avery stiffened, just slightly. The video ended. The screen went black. No music, no narration, just silence. Judge Hale turned to her. You still believe this was nothing? He asked. Avery hesitated, then leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs and said, He didn't die, did he? Gasps, this time not quiet. Someone in the gallery stood and immediately sat back down. Her attorney dropped his pen. Walter didn't flinch. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised anymore. Judge Hale stood slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Miss Monroe, he said, you wear a badge that gives you power. That power was never meant to shield you from responsibility. It was meant to serve, to protect, to uplift. She scoffed. This is ridiculous. Judge Hale stepped down from the bench, walked toward the witness stand, stopped just feet from her. Do you know what happens, he said, when someone like you believes they are above the law? She said nothing. He pointed gently at Walter. This happens. He then pointed back toward her seat. And this happens. Then he paused, looked her in the eye. But not today. He returned to his bench, placed both hands firmly on the wood, and spoke words that cut through her arrogance like wind through glass. This court finds your attitude contemptuous and your behavior disgraceful. You are hereby sentenced to 200 hours of community service at the Los Angeles Veterans Support Center, effective immediately. Avery's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing that," she snapped. "I'm not scrubbing floors for strangers." Judge Hale met her fury with calm steel. "Then I will consider jail time." The courtroom froze, and for the first time, Avery didn't have a comeback. The sun was already high when Avery Monroe pulled into the parking lot of the Los Angeles Veterans Support Center. She didn't slam the car door, but she wanted to. This place, it smelled like punishment, peeling paint, faded flag, a bulletin board covered in duct-taped flyers. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed softly over cracked linoleum floors. A middle-aged woman with silver hair and zero patience stood at the front desk, arms folded. Her name tag read, Maggie Rowe. "You must be Monroe," she said without blinking. Avery offered a tight smile. "That obvious?" Maggie handed her a folded apron. "Kitchen's that way. No orientation, no welcome packet, just a hallway that smelled like coffee and disinfectant." The kitchen was alive with motion. Veterans chopping, frying, stirring. Laughter bubbled in the background. It made Avery tense. An older man with thick glasses and a crooked smile waved her over. Frank Dawes, double knee replacement, lived here now. "New blood," he said cheerfully. "Hope you can handle toast." Avery nodded, wordless, took the bread, set the tables. She moved like a statue in a crowd, rigid, disconnected. The veterans weren't unkind, but they weren't impressed either. She was a guest in a world she didn't understand, and she hated it. Later that afternoon, she found herself wiping down a cafeteria table when someone dropped a tray behind her. Instinctively, she turned, ready to snap. But the man who stood there wasn't clumsy. He had one arm. The other was a prosthetic hook. He didn't apologize. He just looked at her. "You think we're here for pity?" he asked, voice low. Avery froze. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Yes, you do." He didn't wait for a reply, just walked away. The words stuck, and that night, they stayed. By the end of her first week, Avery had burned her hands twice on dishwater, pulled a muscle lifting crates, and spent more time listening than speaking. The badge meant nothing here. No one asked what she did. No one cared. They only watched, and she felt it. Every time she avoided eye contact. Every time she winced at their scars. Every time she questioned why she was even here. Until one afternoon, Elena Carter, a young woman with a scar that ran from ear to jaw, sat across from her during break. "I used to think I didn't need anyone," Elena said quietly. "Now I know better." She pushed a cup of coffee toward Avery. "You don't have to like this place, but if you don't respect it, it will break you." Avery didn't respond, couldn't, because for the first time, she wasn't sure who she was without the shield of a badge. By her third week at the center, Avery Monroe had stopped counting the hours. She no longer flinched when someone handed her a mop. She no longer winced at stories she couldn't relate to. She started listening. She learned that Frank used to sing jazz before his legs gave out. That Elena had once been a firefighter before the flames left her with more than physical scars. That the man with the prosthetic hook, Bobby Larkin, had been shot trying to save someone else's son. And for the first time in a long time, Avery didn't feel stronger than them. She felt smaller, but not in a way that hurt, in a way that made space. She began showing up early, staying late. Not because she had to, but because something inside her had shifted. She even started bringing donuts on Fridays, cheap ones, but still. And then came the moment that told her, quietly, without ceremony, that something had changed for good. It was during lunch. A new veteran had arrived, quiet, disoriented, refused to speak. Staff struggled, voices rose, and Avery, without thinking, sat beside him. Didn't say anything, just sat. 10 minutes passed before he looked up. "You a volunteer?" he asked. Avery hesitated, then nodded. Something like that. He didn't smile, didn't thank her, but he didn't flinch either. That was enough. Later that evening, as the center quieted and dishes were done, Maggie Rowe approached her. "You're not the same woman who walked in here," she said. Avery didn't know what to say, so she didn't. "You're done with your hours next week," Maggie continued. "But if you want to stay..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to, because something deeper than punishment had taken root. That night, Avery walked out into the parking lot, the sky bruised with twilight. Her car felt colder than it used to. The drive home, longer. And as she stared at her own reflection in the rearview mirror, she whispered words she hadn't spoken aloud since the trial. "I was wrong." Not loud, not dramatic, but real. The next morning, she stepped into the courtroom again, this time in civilian clothes. No makeup, no polished boots, just a quiet readiness. Judge Clarence Hale was already seated. He raised an eyebrow as she took her place before him. "Miss Monroe," he said, "your service is complete. You've fulfilled the court's sentence. Do you have anything you wish to say before we conclude?" Avery met his eyes, and for once, they weren't defiant. They were grateful. "I thought community service would be a punishment," she said. But it was a mirror. The room held still. "I learned more in that kitchen than I did in 10 years behind a badge." Judge Hale didn't smile, but something in his gaze softened. "Then perhaps," he said, "the court finally served its purpose." 2 days after her final court appearance, Avery Monroe stood once again in front of the Veterans Support Center. But this time, she wasn't there as a sentence. She was there by choice. No clipboard, no officer's badge, just a box of donated supplies in her arms, and a quiet look of determination in her eyes. Frank was the first to see her. He paused mid-step, eyebrows raised. "I thought you were done." "I am," Avery said. "But I'm not finished," he chuckled. "You're starting to sound like one of us." "I'm hoping to," she replied. Inside, the space was the same, but she wasn't. She moved differently now. Not slower, but softer, with attention, with care. She helped set up chairs for group therapy, cleaned the same kitchen floors that once made her scoff, even led a fundraising meeting, nervous, fumbling, but sincere. Later that week, when someone asked Maggie why Avery kept coming back, the center manager simply said, "Because people who've truly changed don't ask for recognition. They just show up." And she did, week after week. Eventually, she became a liaison between the center and the department, advocating for services, for funding, for better training on how officers treat trauma survivors. She even spoke to recruits, rookies just like she once was. Not with lectures, but with stories. Stories about how authority without humility is just noise. How power isn't the badge on your chest. It's the choice you make when no one's watching. One day, after giving a talk to a group of young cadets, a girl approached her. 17. Nervous, curious. "Were you always this good at helping people?" she asked. Avery smiled gently. "No." "Then, how did you change?" Avery paused, then knelt to the girl's level and said, "Someone showed me what real strength looks like. It wasn't just one person. It was Walter Jennings, whose quiet forgiveness shattered her walls. Elena, whose scars spoke louder than pity. Frank, who made toast and told war stories like gospel. Each of them had given her something her badge never did. Perspective. Now, when Avery looks at herself in the mirror, she doesn't see a uniform. She sees a second chance. And while the world may never forget who she was, she'll never stop proving who she's become. Because redemption doesn't wear a badge. It doesn't need a robe or a gavel or a courtroom. It shows up every morning with rolled up sleeves and open hands. So now the question is, if someone like Avery Monroe can change, can listen, serve, and heal, what's stopping the rest of us? If you were in her place, would you have the humility to face yourself? Would you have the courage to stand up after you refuse to rise? Some stories don't end with a verdict. They end with a choice to rise above the arrogance we once wore like armor. To unlearn the power we thought made us invincible, and to remember that true strength lies in how we treat those who can't fight back. At KaYi, we don't just tell stories. We ask the questions that stay with you long after the screen fades. So ask yourself, what would you do if the badge no longer protected you? Would you still be proud of the reflection looking back? If this story moved you, inspired you, or challenged the way you see the world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because here at KaYi we believe, justice doesn't always wear a uniform, but it always shows up.